It's never too early to break down Bama's first game from the 2025 season. Stick around. This is Way Off Sides. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be. Welcome to your favorite sports talk on YouTube. We talk about everybody, but we're heavy on Bama. Way Off Sides. That's way with 4A's, never 3, never 5. 3's not enough, 5's too many. Just like in Alabama, there are 4. Can you feel it? I can feel it. And what I feel is anxiety. Anxiety is not like anticipation. That's the word we're looking for. Anticipation because the football season's coming. We got 13 weeks left until Alabama kicks off their 2025 campaign, and expectations are through the roof. And even though everybody's talking recruiting, you can feel it. We expect big things from Kalen DeBoer in year 2 now with Ryan Grubb as his offensive coordinator, and Alabama football in their second year without the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Nick Saban. Now, interestingly enough, 2 seasons ago, Alabama got the bid for the 14 playoff, squeaking in right past the Florida State Seminoles, who went undefeated, had a great regular season campaign, but lost their starting quarterback, Jordan Travis, to a career-ending, just awful injury. Would not think for a second to talk poorly of Jordan Travis. That was tough. I remember saying earlier in that season, just the way Norvell and company was using him, like, hey, he's going to get hurt. And it happened, and it thwarted Florida State's playoff bid. We all saw what happened without Jordan Travis once Georgia got a hold of them. It was pretty embarrassing. And they'll tell you that, the majority of our team opted out, blah, blah, blah. Well, national championship contending teams, players don't do that, even in what some would consider meaningless bowls. But interestingly enough, that whole situation happened. There were comments made by Norvell and others up in Tallahassee. I say up in Tallahassee because I am south of Tallahassee, about Alabama and favoritism and SEC bias and all these things. There was a huge hoopla from senators in the state of Florida who were threatening to sue the college football playoff, and just a whole wonky thing. Everybody got piss in their panties, basically. Alabama goes and loses to Michigan, who eventually wins the national title. But interestingly enough, a year and a half removed from all of that, Alabama will travel to Tallahassee in August, last weekend of August, to open the season against the Florida State Seminoles in, Doak Campbell Stadium? That's it. I almost want to say Doak Walker. In Doak Campbell Stadium. I've been to Tallahassee. I've driven through Tallahassee a couple of times. I don't recommend it. I recommend, if you have the option to drive through Tallahassee, jump off a cliff and make sure there's sharp rocks at the bottom. Don't jump off a cliff. So Alabama will open their 2025 campaign under high expectations against the dreaded Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles. Now, we all know what happened last season. Florida State crapped the bed. They tried to go the transfer portal route. They were one of those teams who were on campus the minute they found out Nick Saban was retiring and were poaching guys. We're going to get into some position battles here in a second, not battles, but comparisons. And we'll talk about some former Alabama players who you will see on the field when they take on the Crimson Tide in Tallahassee in August. And we'll talk about some external factors too. It was recently announced that game will be held in the 2:30 Central Time slot. It'll be 3:30 my time, Eastern Time, in Florida. So, interestingly enough, there's a lot of recent history between the Tide and the Noles, and coming off a really bad season for Florida State and Mike Norvell, and a bad season for Alabama to Alabama standards. It wasn't a bad season. I'm sure Florida State would have loved to go 9-4 last season. But for Alabama and the expectations that Nick Saban left and built into that program, I just don't foresee it. Now, we like to get ahead of ourselves here at Way Offsides. For those of you who aren't members of the channel or aren't subscribed, I'll give you a second to go ahead and do that, because we talk about this stuff all year long. We talk about breakdowns, recruiting. We've got another recruiting video coming out later today that you guys are going to want to see. It's a group of 5 stars that Alabama's hosting for official visits that we think Alabama's going to land a good deal of them. If you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss it. And you can just get Cotton's takes on ridiculous things that are way too early to talk about, such as an early preview of Alabama versus Florida State. So that's what we're doing today. Appreciate you sticking around with me for 5 minutes while I talk about a bunch of nonsense. But at the end of this video, I will give you my score prediction for the game. So please stick around till the end. You'll get it right at the end of the video. Don't go anywhere. If there's an ad, wait 5 seconds and skip it, but come back. So what we're going to do is we're going to go position by position and compare these things between Florida State and Alabama and kind of see, just in my opinion, I haven't really dove into this super deep, but just looking at it superficially, who's got the edge and who should win this matchup. Spoiler alert, most of you are going to realize this. I'm going to pick Alabama just because Alabama just opened as a 12.5 point favorite in this game. I think that it could potentially be a lot worse than that. I think that line could move heavily in Bama's favor before the game kicks off. But let's start with quarterbacks. That's going to be the most talked about position. I think in terms of experience, you got to give it to Florida State. However, Alabama's returning 3 guys that are much more capable of being a quarterback than what FSU currently has in their stable. And so I think that, spoiler alert, I do think the starting quarterback in Tallahassee for Alabama will be Ty Simpson. I think Ty Simpson has done it right. He's waited his time. He's learned. He's grown. And with that group of wide receivers that Alabama has, I think Simpson is going to light it up in 2025. And I think that starts in Tallahassee. So I think I'm going to give Alabama the edge there. Now, running backs. Let's talk running backs here, if you will. Alabama has one of the, if not the most loaded stable of running backs in college football. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's nasty. So I would immediately think to give that position advantage over to Alabama, right? But that's not to discount anything. Sorry, that FSU can do. FSU will feature previous Alabama running back Roydell Williams. He was one of those ones that ended up going alongside some others, taking a bag and bouncing out of Tuscaloosa when Nick Saban retired. Now, Roydell did not have a home run year in 2024. If he would have, they probably would have won more games. And so I think that Alabama wins the running back comparison easily. Now let's go back to quarterbacks. Now, FSU, they've got Brock Glenn, the redshirt sophomore out of Tennessee. He hasn't shown me anything, to be 100% honest with you. But they bring in Tommy Castellanos or something like that. Legit dude. He's going to be good out of Waycross, Georgia, but I still think that Alabama gets the nod. Alabama has 3 5-star guys at quarterback. You've got one who's waited his time and sat there, played behind some greats, some starting NFL quarterbacks, and then you've got one who has been with Kalen DeBoer for years, and then you've got another one who is just the expectations through the freaking ceiling. So, yes, I give in running backs and quarterbacks, I give Alabama the nod. Now, something to keep in mind that will be interesting is one head coach who always gave Nick Saban issues was Gus Malzahn. And whether we don't like Auburn, we hate Auburn, but Malzahn was a thorn in Nick Saban's side. It seems like every coach at Auburn ends up being a thorn in Nick Saban's side at sometimes. And remember that the Seminoles brought Gus Malzahn on as their offensive coordinator this season. So they have a decent group of wide receivers. Let's move over to wide receivers. Obviously, the most talented wide receiver on the field is going to be Ryan Williams. But among their group of wide receivers, the one to watch out for is going to be Squirrel Williams. They bring him over. I believe it's from Tennessee, if I remember correctly. Or excuse me, Squirrel White. I know it said Williams. Squirrel White. He's actually out of Birmingham, out of Clay Chalkville. But White is a good wide receiver. They've got a decent group there. And if they're able to distribute the ball, they'll be able to make some noise. But again, and I'm trying to not be biased when I do this, but I have to give Alabama the nod at receiver. Alabama's wide receiving core is pretty disgusting. There's not many schools in the country that don't want Alabama's wide receiving core. Just by the looks of their rosters, it looks like FSU's going to be playing a lot of youth at wide receiver, as will Alabama. But the difference, I think, there too, that you have to weigh is the quarterback situation. I think Alabama has more experience. Looking at it outside of Tommy, FSU's quarterback situation is pretty young as well. So now Alabama will have to go in here offensively and cope with a rowdy environment. It's not just FSU, which is a classic game day scene. Let's be honest. But it's FSU first game of the season. There's a chance that College Game Day will be there. As well, it's going to be hot and humid, and nobody likes to see Alabama play in Florida. They historically have not played well in that state, even in games they win. So it's just going to be a little, those are things that they're going to have to control and plan for. And we'll see how it goes. And keep in mind that even though I'm giving Alabama the nod with quarterbacks here, the guys that are going to be playing in one of the most hostile environments in college football, their first game, whoever it is. Again, I think it'll be Ty Simpson. Now, tight ends, offensive line. I think this could be a little bit of a toss-up. I think Florida State will have a decent offensive line. I think Alabama's is just more experienced. Those first couple of games of the season last year, you got a lot of guys some playing time on that offensive line. And so I'm trying not to be all pro Bama here, just so it's an interesting video for people outside of Alabama's fan base. But I've also got to give that nod to Alabama, especially considering Bama's group of tight ends that they have this year. They're young, but man, they're good. Now let's move to the defensive side of the ball. Defensive line. Florida State a couple of years ago had probably the best, if not one of the best defensive lines in college football. That undefeated season, a lot of those guys are gone. So they're bringing a lot of youth in. They've kind of been rebuilding through recruiting and the transfer portal. They're a transfer portal heavy team. That's kind of been their philosophy. I've put out plenty of videos discussing how I don't think that in most school cases that doesn't work. You have to supplement with the transfer portal. You can't build a team out of the transfer portal and be successful. But on the defensive line, I'm going to go neck and neck. And I think Alabama has some monsters down on the defensive line as well. You know, those hybrid positions that'll be used as pass rushers. But I want to at least leave something that's not a check mark for Alabama. But I need to see more Alabama's pass rush this year in terms of getting to the quarterback and finishing. We saw guys like Tim Keenan and stuff last season. They were getting consistent pressure, but they weren't finishing. Now, I think in 2025, what you'll see is some other guys stepping up. We saw James Smith come on late in the year. So I think potentially Alabama could get the nod at defensive line, but I'm going to call it a wash at that position. Now, let's get into the linebackers. I think that's a very similar situation, except for the fact that Alabama is returning Deontay Lawson. assuming he's healthy and ready to go in this game, Lawson will be the best linebacker on the field between both rosters, is probably potential first-round talent. And then Alabama's bringing in a new crop of linebackers, but they've also recruited well at linebacker, and they've gone and done really well in the transfer portal at that position. I think I've got to give the nod to Bama there too. Trying really hard to be unbiased, but just looking at the rosters, it's tough to find somebody that makes me think that Florida State's going to be able to hold up that early for 4 quarters. Yes, Alabama's going to have to deal with first game jitters of this and that. So is Florida State. Now let's move out to the secondary. Obviously, this is a no contest. Alabama secondary is expected to be elite. Alabama ultimately all over had a top 10 defense last year. That's going to continue going into 2025. There are ridiculously high expectations for their linebacking, or excuse me, their cornerbacks and safeties. I apologize. And I just don't see that letting up. I don't see it. There may be a game or two where, some things may get over the top of them here or there. Everybody's really high on Bray Hubbard. There may be a time where you see him out of position, but it's only going to take a couple of times until they get their feet under them. I don't think it'll take as long as it did last season. So the mark there too goes to Alabama. And then, the last group is going to be special teams. And I think that goes to Bama too. Now, the only thing we haven't talked about is coaching. And that is clearly going to land in Alabama's favor, even with Gus Malzahn as that offensive coordinator. You've got Tony White as the defensive coordinator. Alabama's staff, Kane Womack had a top 10 defense last year in his first year at Alabama. He's recruited talent to work the system that he runs. On top of it, Kalen DeBoer was already a top 5 head coach coming out of Washington into Alabama. And now you tack on Ryan Grubb. It is hard. You'd be hard pressed to not pick Alabama in every single category that I just picked them. Now, that's not to say that FSU isn't going to play well. This is not the FSU team of last season. It is revamped. It's young. It is a very young team. But that Gus Malzahn offense has historically given Alabama fits. Now, we saw that Alabama last season was their defense fell victim to, the inside shovel pass and a lot of this tricky stuff on the ground. That guys like Diego Pavia and obviously Oklahoma were able to run. Now, if Malzahn is able to implement some of those things, I would not be surprised if FSU can put some points on Alabama's defense early. And it's going to take those kids some time to get used to seeing that again. I'm sure Kane Womack has addressed it in the offseason. It will be addressed, but also, there's not going to be a lot of film to go off of in terms of what Malzahn's going to try to do with the talent he has at Florida State that he's been doing down further south in Florida. They may be able to pull some Auburn tape to see what Auburn did when he was head coach there, the success he had under there. But I do think that Womack's system is better suited to stop that kind of offense compared to what Nick Saban would run. Nick Saban's a little more traditional. And so with those hybrid positions, I feel like Alabama has a little bit more speed. We saw that. He wasn't necessarily a hybrid position, but we saw that out of Jihad Campbell last season. That's what got him boosted up into the first round. The guy his lateral movement from sideline to sideline every play was absolutely ridiculous. So if Alabama can find that somewhere defensively, I struggle to see how Florida State is going to be able to outscore this team, especially considering the offensive weapons they have in that wide receiving core. That wide receiving room is going to neutralize a lot of secondaries, and it's going to be tough. As if there's somebody that can get the ball. I remember last season seeing footage after games, even in losses where you've got wide receivers at Alabama running open. Jalen Milroe didn't see him. If they get a quarterback in there who can find that, the offensive line gives him time, he can find it. It's going to be very hard. It doesn't matter who you are. It's going to be very, very hard to beat Alabama in 2025. So what do you think? Am I being too biased? Am I being unbiased? Am I giving Alabama too much of a nod? Am I not giving Florida State enough of a nod? Like I said, I think Florida State is going to be a better team than they were last year. Florida State's going to win more than 2 games. They're probably going to win about 6, I think, potentially between 5 and 6. And they're on their way back up, but it's going to take them a little bit to get there. They've got the right guy at offensive coordinator to do it. Mike Norvell might want to win some games quick because he might work himself out of a job. Gus Malzahn is the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles. Can you imagine? And they've got the NIL. They're putting money into their NIL. They're playing the game as they should. It's just that I think they've relied too much on the transfer portal. So before you leave, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a thing. Like I said, we got a recruiting video coming out later today. You're going to want to see that. We're going to talk about a bunch of 5 stars that Alabama's going after. As always, say your prayers, read your Bibles, wash your hands, horns down, beat Auburn and LSU, Tennessee and FSU too. Roll Tide, y'all.